So this is the Samyang 14mm, also known as the Rokinon, depending on whereabouts in the world you are. It's a f2.8 14mm autofocus super wide angle prime lens for full frame Sony cameras, and that is quite a mouthful. Now Samyang very kindly lent me this to take with me on my recent trip to Iceland through their UK supplier Holden. However, they have zero influence on this review whatsoever, and in fact we'll only be seeing it at the same time as you once it's published. So the lens comes in at less than £500 in the UK, which is an absolute steal for an autofocus super wide angle lens, but we'll talk more about that towards the end of the video. The lens is mainly made of metal, and it does feel really good quality, and in terms of the weight it balances really nicely on my Sony a7R4. Now there's no filter thread on the lens due to the fact that the front element is so curved, but it does come with this really solid lens hood that clicks into place, and once it's on you don't need to worry about it coming off whatsoever. It has a single focus ring which is really smooth, and it's very accurate and consistent when you're manually focusing. Now we've talked about what it is, how much it costs and how it's built, but obviously the most important thing with the lens is the results that it produces. Now just a note, I'm only reviewing this lens regarding stills. For video I'd definitely recommend checking out Chris Brockhurst's review that goes into much more detail around using this lens for video. Now when it comes to still image quality, for the price of this lens, I'm definitely impressed. Now whilst it does have to be said that it definitely tapers off in the corners, the centre is much sharper than I expected, especially from f4 upwards, and when you get to around f7, f8, it's almost perfect. Now with the corners, once you've used the lens correction tool in Lightroom or the equivalent, it's much less noticeable, and you are going to need to use that tool because, as you would expect for a lens of this width, barrel distortion is definitely an issue, as you can see here with this before and after. Now when it comes to autofocus, to be honest with you, it's been a bit of a mixed bag. In Iceland, in the bright sunshine, it focused really quickly. However, I have noticed that if you're either in low light or if you're focusing on an area that either is in shadow or has very little contrast, it does sometimes hunt for focus a little bit before finding it, which can be frustrating. Now there is apparently a firmware update for the lens, but because the lens isn't mine, it's not something that I've looked into, but it's worth bearing in mind. So all that being said, let's have a look at some more of the images that I've taken with this lens. Now when it comes to alternative lenses, when you're looking at something as wide as 14mm, there aren't really that many options. You've got both the Sigma and the Sony 14mm f1.8s, which are both roughly around £1,400. The Sony 12 to 24mm f4, which is also about £1,400, and the newer 2.8 version, which is almost double that at £2,700. Now I can't comment on the qualities of those lenses for the same reason that I don't own any of those lenses. They're all far too expensive for me personally to justify buying them. £500, however, is a much more enticing price tag for a lens that, in all honesty, I personally don't need in my camera bag. However, if you are looking for an affordable super wide angle lens that provides great image quality over the majority of the frame, you aren't too fussed about corner sharpness, and you don't need to be worrying about using filters, this is a great option to look at, especially if the firmware update that I mentioned has fixed that autofocus hunting issue. I hope that this review has helped you out, and if you are considering this lens, I really would recommend it, whether that be for landscape photography, astrophotography, real estate photography. There are undoubtedly lenses that will provide better results, but they cost 3 times more than the Samyang, and as I mentioned, personally, I just can't justify that. I'd love to know your thoughts though, let me know down in the comments. That's it for today though, just a brief review on the 14mm. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.